Welcome to the Sleep to Dream Analytics Explainer video, where better sleep starts with better understanding. Sleep. It's something we all do, right? We spend about a third of our entire lives completely out of it, and yet it's still one of the biggest, most persistent mysteries in all of biology. But what if the answer to why we sleep, and what happens when we don't, isn't just floating around in our brains? What if it's actually written, line by line, in our DNA? Well, today we're going to try to crack that very code. I mean, really stop and think about that for a second. From a purely evolutionary point of view, being totally unconscious and vulnerable for hours every single day is a terrible idea. It's a huge risk. So whatever benefit we get from it, it has to be absolutely massive. It has to be essential for survival. So what is it? For years and years, we looked for the answer in all the usual places: our neurons, our hormones, our daily behaviors. But now, a real revolution is happening. By looking at the human genome itself, scientists are finally starting to get a glimpse of the fundamental purpose of sleep. To really get how big of a deal this is, we have to start at the beginning. The first major clue that sleep was hardwired into our biology came long before we could ever sequence a gene. The evidence came from a pretty unique group of people, those who share the exact same DNA. That's right, we're talking about twin studies. When scientists hooked up identical twins to an EEG and watched their brain activity while they slept, they found something amazing. Their unique brainwave patterns, their sleep signatures, if you will, were almost carbon copies of each other, way more similar than what you see in fraternal twins. This was it. This was the first real smoking gun that pointed to our genes having powerful control over how we sleep. And this quote just drives that point home. I mean, think about that. For a lot of these sleep-related brainwave patterns, over 80% of what makes your sleep different from my sleep is just written in our DNA. That's a huge number. So, okay, if genes are calling the shots, the next big question is, what exactly are they saying? So how do you listen to a gene? It's not like you can just ask it what it's up to. But scientists have developed a really clever technique that lets them do the next best thing. It allows them to see which genes are flipped on and which are flipped off at any given time. This process is called measuring gene expression. A good way to think about it is like looking at the activity log for a cell. By seeing which genes are on when we're asleep versus when we're awake, we get a direct look at what the brain's priorities are in each state. And when scientists did this for the first time, they found something that sounds kind of small, but was actually a massive discovery. About 5% of all the genes they could find in the brain actually change how active they are between sleep and wakefulness. Now, 5% might not sound like a lot, but we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of genes. The real aha moment, though, was seeing what they were doing. You can see it right here. It's a clear division of labor. While we're awake, the genes that are switched on are all about action, producing energy, responding to stress, just keeping the lights on and the neurons firing. But during sleep, the genetic machinery completely shifts gears. The genes that kick into high gear are the ones involved in building things, complex molecules, and in cellular repair. The sleeping brain isn't off at all. It's more like a super busy construction site, fixing all the wear and tear from the day. Okay, so we know that hundreds of genes are involved. But that's a bit like knowing a crime was committed by a huge crowd. How do you possibly find the ringleaders? The specific genes that are actually regulating the whole process. For that, scientists needed a much more focused strategy. They used this incredible technique that's basically like genetic triangulation. First, they take a whole bunch of different genetically diverse strains of mice and measure a specific sleep trait, like how well they bounce back after being sleep deprived. Then, they scan all of their genomes to find a specific genetic marker that keeps popping up in the mice that are really good at recovering, but not in the ones that are bad at it. When they find that genetic hotspot, they know they're probably looking right at a culprit gene. And guess what? It totally works. This exact method led investigators to zero in on one particular region of a chromosome that seemed to control recovery from sleep loss. And smack dab in the middle of that hotspot was a gene called Homer 1A. We now know that this gene's activity skyrockets when we're sleep deprived, and it's a key player in helping our brain connections reset after a long, busy day. We had our first major suspect. Now, finding a suspect is one thing, but getting a confession is something else entirely. So the next step is to basically interrogate that gene. Scientists do this using something called reverse genetics. They take a suspect gene and they just turn it off in a mouse to see what breaks. And this process led to one of the biggest surprises in the entire field of sleep science. Scientists decided to mess with a really famous family of genes, the clock genes. These are the master timekeepers that control our 24-hour circadian rhythms. They're what tell our bodies when it's time to feel sleepy and when it's time to be alert. So, what do you think would happen if you just knocked one of them out? Well, the obvious answer, right? The expected outcome was that the mouse's internal 24-hour clock would just completely break. It would lose its daily rhythm of sleeping and waking and just be active at totally random times. And yeah, that's exactly what happened. But that wasn't the whole story. Here's the twist. The researchers noticed that these mice also lost their ability to respond to being sleep deprived. They couldn't build up what we call sleep pressure. That's that feeling you get of being more and more tired the longer you stay awake. The system that regulates how much sleep they need, not just when they sleep, was totally broken. This was a bombshell. It meant that these clock genes weren't just simple timers. They are a fundamental part of the sleep machine itself. So, let's put all of these clues together. We've got genes that turn on to repair the brain. We have specific genes that control how we recover from sleep loss. And we have clock genes that are doing double duty, managing both timing and need. This all paints a brand new, much richer picture of what sleep is, and it completely challenges a very old, deeply held belief. For a very long time, this quote was basically the central rule of sleep science. Because, the most obvious effects of sleep and sleep loss are all in our heads, right? We feel mentally sharp or mentally foggy. So the thinking was that sleep was a purely neurological event, something that happened in the brain for the brain. The genetic evidence, though, started hinting at something much bigger, something that affects every single part of you. And this is where the story gets really wild. When scientists started comparing how sleep deprivation affected genes in the brain versus other parts of the body, they found something absolutely stunning. Just look at this. The liver had more genes that were significantly thrown out of whack by a lack of sleep than the brain did. This discovery completely changes the game. It proves that sleep is not just for the brain. It's a state of systemic, whole-body restoration. Your heart, your lungs, your immune system, your liver, all of their genetic programs are deeply tied to the sleep-wake cycle. This is why a bad night's sleep doesn't just make you feel foggy. It disrupts your metabolism, your health, on a body-wide molecular level. So let's just quickly recap the big takeaways here. We've learned that sleep is not a passive state of being off. It's an active genetic program for maintenance and repair. We've seen how specific sleep genes control how we bounce back from being tired. We've learned that clock genes are way more than just timers. They also control our deep-seated need for sleep. And maybe most important of all, we've discovered that sleep is a whole body affair, essential for every single one of our organs. And all of this genetic research leaves us with a really exciting question for the future. As we keep identifying these sleep genes and figuring out exactly what each one does, could we move past the one-size-fits-all sleeping pills of today? Could we be entering an age of personalized sleep medicine, where treatments for sleep disorders are designed to work with an individual's unique DNA? The genetic code is being cracked, and the answers we find could change everything about how we rest. Thank you for watching the Sleep to Dream Analytics Explainer video. We hope you sleep well and dream easy.